Not from Leicester, not from Kettering, and not from Northampton. Live from Market Harborough, this is 95.1 HFM.
HFM Weather, in association with the new South Leicestershire Learning Innovation Centre. New location, new ways of learning, new experience for you. For more information, telephone free on 0800 731 6723.
Over to our very first guest. Steve Cockayne is sitting opposite me in the studio. Good morning again, Steve. You can't see the computer screen from where you are, but we've actually got a little map of the Leicestershire district and a picture of you, Steve. And in just a second, I'm going to load up your profile onto the screen so that everyone can see the information that you supplied about yourself. So, Steve, just tell us a little bit about your background and your history.
Well, I spent most of my working life as a cameraman at the BBC. I was there for 15 years pushing a camera around, and another 5 years behind a desk after that. At the end of that time I picked up a redundancy, which seemed not a very good idea at the time, but in retrospect I suppose it was the best thing that happened to me.
So what sort of programmes have you worked on then Steve?
Well, as a cameraman I did the full range of stuff in BBC Studios. I was doing children's programmes like Blue Peter, Jack and Ori, features like Tomorrow's World, Current Affairs, Nationwide, Panorama. Early on I was doing big song and dance shows which seem quite old-fashioned now and which seemed quite old-fashioned at the time, actually. Things like the Black and White Minstrels.
Black and White Minstrel Show.
Black and White Minstrels.
There's a blast from the past, isn't there?
I worked on the very last series of the Black and White Minstrels.
Yes.
I also did things like Val Dunican, Nana Muscuri. I did a fair amount of drama as well in the days when they did 1 hour studio dramas.
Yes.
Like A Need in Line, Z-Cars.
Z-Cars.
Dixon of Dock Green. I did the very last Dixon of Dock Green when Jack Warner was in a wheelchair.
Really?
Yeah.
Dixon of Dock Green.
Yes.
Oh, I can still almost hear the theme music coming over the waves as I'm talking to you. Oh, absolutely. Yes, thank you very much for that rendition, Steve. Yeah. Oh, yes, a question about Dixon of Dock Green. Now, what was the name of the sergeant who was in Dixon of Dock Green? Can you remember him?
Hopeless. No, I can remember some of the shots, but I can't remember the name.
Because I've got a feeling that in the credits for Heartbeat, there is somebody involved in Heartbeat who was actually in Dixon of Dock Green as well. Crawford. Was it Crawford?
I know who you mean.
Can't
remember. Long time ago.
We'll move on. But I also believe you've worked on Doctor Who as well.
Yes, I did a fair amount of science fiction, Blake's 7, Doctor Who, and some children's SF series as well. But I was working on Doctor Who in the days of Tom Baker.
Oh, Tom Baker,
did several series. He was an extraordinary, larger-than-life, amazing character. Really lit up the place. Quite a unique person to have worked with.
I should imagine so. I actually got a book on his autobiography.
Yeah, interesting story.
Makes interesting reading.
Yeah,
I understand he was working on a building site when he actually got the call to audition for it.
Yeah, and before that he was in a monastery for a while. He was a monk. Extraordinary guy. He used to come up with the most amazing quips as well. One particular time, it was a standard science fiction set up, monsters and machinery and all that. And Tom Baker suddenly said, if Ken Russell was directing this, he'd turn it into a fantasy.
Oh, yes. Wonderful days. And you worked on EastEnders as well, I believe.
Yes. In the fairly early days of EastEnders, I did several series. I did Dirty Den's Funeral, which was done on location in a church in Watford.
Yeah.
So that was one little historical landmark.
So when you were working on these programmes, were some of them actually going out live, or were they all recorded?
Some of it was live. I mean, things like Blue Peter, Tomorrow's World were always done live. The current affairs that I did, like Nationwide, Panorama, Newsnight, was done live. I did a bit of breakfast television in the early years of that, which was live. And there were odd things like Val Dunican was done live from the TV theatre. The Wogan show, when he was on TV, was live 3 times a week. Top of the Pops was occasionally live.
That was a bit of a risk for some of the artists in those days, wasn't it?
Well, it was, yes, and we even had live orchestras at that time. Johnny Pearson and the Top of the Pops Orchestra.
Yes.
It was a full-size live band in the studio. But there's nothing to beat live television, actually. It is really an exciting experience.
I should think it is, yes.
You only get one chance at it.
Absolutely. Have you got any disasters or anything that went horribly wrong on anything that you've been filming?
Yeah, I can remember an occasion when ABBA were appearing on a show. There was a bit of scenery designed to look like a lift shaft, and they were supposed to come up in the lift and appear out of a cloud of dry ice smoke.
Oh, yes.
And I had a shot framed up on the lift doors. Dry ice was there. Smoke dissipated. No ABBA. Empty shot. Wasn't quite sure what to do about that. And it turned out they'd all fallen off the back of the rostrum and were struggling around on the floor.
Oh, dear. That went out live, did it?
It went out live, nothing anybody could do.
Yes, dear. Well, I remember one, just a little bit of nostalgia here, many years ago, watching Tony Hancock's last performance on television when he was doing some cabaret live in Manchester.
Yeah.
And it was absolutely tragic because he just lost the plot, and it was just a great embarrassment. And, you know, if there was any argument for recorded television, that was it, because it was just a public humiliation of a great comedian.
Yeah, I never worked with Hancock. He was a little bit before my time.
Right, so you didn't do the Hancock half hour? Hancock's half hour? No. Okay, so moving on from your days in the BBC, you now do some work in Watford, is it?
Yeah, that's right. When I left the Beeb, I cast around for other work, and I had various plans of my own, including writing a book. So in the end, I went for a part-time job, and I was teaching television production at West Herts College in Watford, which is rather an inconvenient distance away.
Yes.
The way that happened was, at the time, I had decided how far I was prepared to travel for work.
Yeah.
Got a pair of compasses, drew a circle on the map, and decided only to apply for jobs within that circle. And West Herts College was right on the edge. I almost didn't go for it, but in the end I did, and that was the one that came up. So I did that for 6 years.
So that was a bit of a coincidence. Weren't you also lecturing on technology and society as well?
Yes, this was on the same course. I was teaching on a degree course called Media Production Management, which, as far as I know, is the only course on that subject in the country.
Yeah.
Initially, I went in to teach video production, which I did at all levels. But there was a course running which was originally called Contemporary Technology, which I was asked to take over, and they wanted some sort of social slant on it. And as it happens, my degree was in sociology. This is from years ago.
Yes.
So I brought that knowledge, plus my knowledge of television, as my specialisms, and developed a new course called Technology and Society, which I believe is still running. So
that's very relevant to the series that we're doing out today. We're looking at all aspects of technology and the information society. Well, what I've done, Steve, is I've got the web page about your new book that I've loaded up for everybody. So I hope for everybody who's out there logged on and listening will immediately go out and buy it. So would you like to tell us a little bit about your book, Steve?
Yes, the book is nothing to do with television. It's not a technical book. It's a work of fantasy fiction. It's called Wanderers and Islanders, and it's the first of a sequence. What can I say about it? According to the reviews, it's an innovative sort of fantasy because the structure is unusual, and there aren't too many dragons or other cliche things like that. So I appear to have been a bit of an innovator there, although I didn't realise it at the time.
So is this something in the future, or is it a fantasy world, or?
Well, it's a fantasy world. The technology is mainly Victorian. It's sort of mahogany and brass, H.G. Wells type machinery.
Yeah.
But it does bear a bit of a resemblance to things like the internet and television. So we're looking at modern ideas, but portrayed as very old-fashioned technology.
Yes. So what's your view of how information communication technology can help us innovate? Have you got any thoughts on that?
Well, I can talk about my own way of writing, and I suppose you count that as innovation.
Yeah.
I use a computer. I use Word for Windows, which is a very straightforward word processing program.
Yeah.
And I do the whole thing on computer. I don't do any of the writing on paper. I start and finish on the computer screen.
Yeah.
And the way I work is a book will start off as one page of text. I'll just jot a few ideas down on screen, save the file, open it again, add some thoughts. And once I've got a list of ideas on screen, I find I can start moving them around, change the order, put them in a logical sequence, and gradually it develops into something coherent.
So the technology you're using really is helping you to assemble your thoughts into, and that would be quite difficult if you were just doing it on paper, wouldn't it?
Yeah, it's helping me to assemble and order my thoughts.
Yes.
And it really is a very powerful tool. I've used it in the past for planning lectures when I was teaching, writing letters obviously, and for planning books and chapters of books and sections of books. It just makes it so easy to change things, move stuff around.
Do you use the internet for research to give you any ideas? To get a realistic background for some of the stories. Have you done that at all?
To be honest, I don't, because the stories come from my imagination, and most of the background comes from my imagination as well. I've used the internet a bit to pick up bits and pieces, but it's not one of the major tools that I use now.
Right. Okay, Steve. Well, thanks very much for joining us this morning.